What is going on, fellow game developers? In this video I'm going to show you how you can make one shader that can create cartoony looking water and also lava as well. Now there's a few settings with this shader. Let's just demaximize it, go back to the scene view. You see there's a little bug here where sometimes the water goes a bit high, and that's just because the wave is higher than the actual edges here. You'd probably need to play around with that, but you can play around with all these settings. You see we have the water shader here, which is just using a water shader I've created. And yeah, there's a bunch of different settings here you can mess around with. You can mess around with the wave height, so you can see how high the wave actually comes, and adds, it can add a bit of distortion there. It can also cause a couple of issues, so you want to play around with multiple settings as well. There's also the wave spread, which can make it a bit more wild, a bit more wavy. Let's say if you go for 5, you can see something more like this, kind of like a hot tub. If you want to do a hot tub, you probably want to stick to lower numbers for that though. And then you've got wave speed for how fast the waves are flowing. You can also have flow speed, which is actually the flow of the white area here. That's you can see there. Again, all these settings are for the same for the lava, except from you can just change the color to give it the same effect and tweak some of the settings here. So you can see you can mess around with this and create some weird crazy stuff, but what we're going to do is we're just going to create our own. I'm going to show how you can do your own. So for now, let's create in this folder here, I'm going to create a new material, which we're going to be calling it the water shader material matte, water shader matte. And we are literally just going to drag this onto this shader here because it's just a white, it's now just a white plane. By the way, this is just a plane inside of here. And we're going to do the same. We're going to duplicate this and we're going to call it the lava shader matte, which we are just going to drag onto the lava on the right here, which we will mess around with at the end. We're going to start with just the wall. We can actually turn off this as well, so we want to re-add those in. And there you go. So let's start with the water shader. So on the water shader, we actually want to create a new shader graph, and we're going to use URP. We're currently using URP. I'm using Unity version 2021.3.11. Any version above this will definitely work. If they change a few things, you may have to tweak it, but hopefully it should be good. And we're going to use the unlit shader graph. And I'm just going to call this the water lava shader. And then on both the mattes, what we want to do is just go to shader graphs, and we're going to say water lava shader just there. And there you go. You see we now just have this dull gray. Now if we double click this to open it up in shader graph, here we go, maximize this, and there you go. This is the shader we currently have. Now in the preview at the bottom right here, we are just going to tweak this. Bring this tool and turn this into a quad to give us a plane, because this is how you're going to probably most likely view the element here. Now one of the first things I want to do is on the surface type, we're going to turn this to transparent. This is going to allow us to add some sort of alpha to it. So you can see here it's currently set to 1. We're going to set up a value to be able to tweak this as well. But let's get started. Let's start with the actual visuals first of the water, then we'll talk about actually displacing it and making the actual wave effect on it. So let's start off with a time node. So the time node is basically going to be how our water shader moves. We're going to be using just general time. We're going to feed time into it, and it's going to take that time, and basically we're going to multiply it with a value. So let's start off by adding this into a multiply A. And then we're going to create a new water, or a new property here, which is just going to be a float, and we're going to call this flow speed. You know what, this should probably be called foam speed, because this is going to be for the foamy sort of effect, the actual lines in between. And what we're going to do is we're just going to apply this up here, and we're going to set a default value to probably 0.5. It might even need to be lower, but we'll mess around with that once we see it. So once we've got that, we want to put this into one more multiply. We're going to put it into multiply B up here. So this is going to be our foam speed here. And then we're also going to have another one, which is going to be the flow speed. There we go. The flow speed, which we can just drag out here and drag this into here. Again, we're going to set this to about 0.5 just to start with. You're going to want to tweak these values later on anyway, because we're going to be making custom ones for both lava and water. Now we want to put this multiply into another multiply. Now I know we're multiplying a lot of stuff here, but there's a reason for it. So this one is going to be multiplied by a factor 2, which is actually going to be called the flow direction. Now the flow direction is going to tell it, so if you're making a river or something similar, you're probably going to want to have it flow in a certain direction. So for here, we can leave this at 0, but if you wanted it to flow in a downwards pattern, you could probably put 1 or -1 here, and it would flow in a full up or down way. So we'll leave that at 1 for now. We'll put 0.1 there as well, just so you can see it once we actually hook it up. Now this needs to go into a tiling and offset node, and we're going to put this into the actual offset of the node. We're going to leave the rest of this just like it is. All we need to do is actually offset it. That's all we're going to do. Then we're going to take the output and put this into a Voronoi, or Voronoi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but basically the Voronoi is these little cells. If we actually disconnect this real quick, you can see it's these cells here, and if we change these settings, you can see we get more little cells. We basically zoom out on the cell, and then we can give it a random offset that just applies like this, and it gives you that sort of flow. So you can kind of see these lines here, which we're going to be using as the water flow lines. So we're just going to plug this into there. We're going to set the angle to this multiply. So this is actually going to give us the angle of these flowing. You can kind of see these are moving quite slow, and that's kind of the foam movement. So now we want to just change this foam movement. I'm actually going to make this a bit faster, maybe 1. You can see now the foam's moving a bit more sporadically. I'm also going to take the flow speed and put that down to about 0.2, just so you can see it there. And the flow direction, again, we just want that to be about 0.5. There you go. That's flowing a bit nicer now. Let's just take this off. Let's move all of this back a little as well. There we go. So now we've got this. We also want the density, which is going to be the foam density. So let's create a float for this, and we'll call this foam density. And we can just drop this in. We can plug it again. Let's just give the preview out just so we can see it. And what we want to do is set this to probably a prefix of like 5. 5 is roughly good. Yeah, we'll stick it at 5 for now. And there you go. You've got the actual visual effect for this now moving here, but these dots aren't big enough. We kind of want to multiply this sort of dot area. So we're going to put this into a power node. Now you can see here, this kind of gives it a bit more. The more we add this, the more foamy you can see the actual effect gets. If we put this 5, you can see we actually kind of get the water flow just without the color, the sort of pattern a toony sort of shader would have. Let's move this into its own property by creating a foam thickness, or a foam, yeah, we'll call it a foam thickness. There we go. We can also set this to default be 5. Drop this in and just plug it in like that. Plug and play, just like that. And there you go. Now we can mess around with this in the actual shader graph outside of this to tweak this value if you want to make it look different. You'll probably want to change this for lava to be a bit more thicker or a bit more thin. You can just play around with this. Let's set it to that. I like that kind of look. So now we have the actual the power, this look. We kind of want to have a color. So what we need is to multiply this with a color. So we are going to create a color node, just call it color, bring it to the top because it kind of makes sense to be up there. And then what we're going to do is add this in here. Now I'm going to give this a default as a bluey, watery. Oh, this is going to be the foam color. Sorry, I've just realized I'm doing this a bit weird. We also probably want to make this a HDR because then we can give it some sort of brightness to give that sort of glowing, sort of foamy effect. Let's bring it up there. That'll do there. So this is gonna, I'm gonna rename this to foam color. That primary say. Let's also make sure the foams are all together and the flows are separate, because these are separate things. The flow is actually the movement of things going down, whereas the foam is the lines in between. And there you go. That's looking pretty good. I think that works for that color. But again, that's not the final color. We actually want to multiply this with an overall color. So we're gonna add an adds node and put this into B. And then over here, we want another color, which is going to be the overall water color or the lava color, depending on what we're going to do. Again, I'm going to make this a slightly darker blue. Probably something like this. Bring it around. That should do for now. And let's actually drag this in and combine this over here. There you go. You see, we kind of got a water. You're probably going to want to play with these colors a little bit to make them a bit more watery. So yeah, you kind of got the sort of water feel from here. Now what we can do is we can just plug this straight into there. We can save this asset. Let's no longer maximizes and go back to our scene, and you can kind of see here what it's looking like. So let's go to our water shader and actually apply these colors in here. Go set this to like the darker blue, so you can see you've already got the water there, and then you can just play around with these colors to see what you want, which kind of works for your water, your style of game. There you go. So now you've got like a nice little water shade there, which looks pretty good. It works pretty well, and it's there. But the problem is this isn't currently flowing. It's flat. It doesn't have much going on for it. So that's great, but we kind of want to make this look pretty cool. So back to our shader here. Now we're going to group all of these into a section, and we're going to call this the actual water or visuals for this. So this is going to be the actual, like, the look, the style, how this is all working. But what we want is to add some movement to this position element here. So to do that, we're going to take basically some of the stuff we already have. So we're going to want a time node and the flow speed, as well as the flow direction. So we're just going to grab these three here, actually probably all of this from here. So we'll copy this, paste this up here, and move this out. But now this is where it gets different. So here we're going to have it come into here, and we're going to have some movement, but we're not going to be putting this into a Voronoi. What we're going to be doing is putting this into a gradient. So we're going to come over here and say gradient, and we're just going to go for gradient noise here, just like this. Probably set this to about 5, 6 maybe. This is what the wave spread is. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a wave float here called wave spread, or wave... Yeah, we're going to say wave spreads. It's basically the actual density of the wave. So you know how I showed you how chaotic you could have it like a bubble bath or like a hot tub? That's kind of what this is. And we're going to set this by default to be about 5. And there you go. So that is going to give us this height map in sense. So we're going to be converting this into basically like a height map where it will allow us to tweak and move things. Now, the issue with this is it will go above 1. Sometimes we're going to have some issues here where the colors are too much, especially once we pull it through a power node, which we're going to need to make it a bit more visual. So now we've got this gradient noise. What we want to do is we want to put this into a power node. So we'll put this into a power node, but you're going to see some pink dots, and they're going to cause some issues for us. So we're going to fix that in a moment. But what we're going to be here, this is going to be the wave height. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this power node back out into a we're going to create a new property called a float, which we're going to say wave height. Now this is going to be how high we can get the waves. So if we now put this in here, we'll probably want to set this to probably just 1 or maybe even 0.5 to start with. We're going to want something quite small. If you see these pink ones are coming through, that's because it's going past 1 value. So to fix this, what we want to do is I'm going to bring this power node down, and we're going to put this into a 1 minus node because we want to reverse this look. But we're also going to have the pink elements appear here too. So to fix that, we just want to clamp our value. Now this is going to be the in value, and we can literally leave this at 0 and 1 because these are the two values we want to allow it to clamp to. So this will stop any of those pink bumps which will cause us issues later on. Now we want to take this and pull it into a multiply in the B. And now this is where we actually start getting the position. So what we want to do is put this into a normal vector. And we want to set this to the object because we want this to be relative to the object. Then we want to take this into an adds node. And this one will go into a position node, which we want to change to object as well. And let's just grab all of this, bring it back slightly. And then we take this adds node and we drag it into our position. Now you can't see much going on this screen. You might see a bit of waviness on the edges, but this is now moving the actual vertexes along this to create a waving pattern. So if we now save asset and minimize it, go back to the scene view, you can see we have this beautiful water. And obviously this is a bit chaotic. So now to fix this, we're going to go into our water shader material, and we are just going to change the wave height to probably something like 0.1, which gives you a nice little wave. It's still quite sporadic there. So let's actually lower this to, let's say, 0.05. Now this is going well, but you can see this is still spiking in some areas, which isn't exactly what we want for waves. So let's go back in here, and just where we have our max output, what we want to do is create another float, and I'm going to call this float the max height, which we're going to want to bring in and sell it here. Now the max height, I'm going to set it to default to 0.5. We're going to swap this to a slider, and we're going to have it between 0 and 1, or maybe 0.1 and 1. And there you go. So that should give us the maximum height we're allowed. So if we save this asset, go back to our scene, we can actually lower this so it doesn't actually go too much higher. So I'm going to say 0.25, and then you should see it's a lot less sporadic. You get a few waves here, but you can adjust these settings to mess around with it. So you can have this, which isn't much of a waves. Then we can go up to something like 0.5 to have it a bit more crazy, a bit more bubble bathy. But something like 0.1 or 0.05 is a nice number for water. And there you go. That is a simple water shader. But now how do we actually do the lava? So the lava is actually really simple. First things first, the color, we want it to be a dark, reddy, brown, black color, sorry. Something, you could probably go right up here and bring it to something like this. Maybe a little bit more if you want, but I'd probably leave it at that. And then the actual color, you're probably going to want some sort of orangey yellow. You're going to want it quite bright and quite powerful. Probably a 2 there. And so far, this is looking good, but it's a bit too wavy for that. So what we want to do is set the wave height to probably 0.1, so it's less bumpy. The foam density, you're probably going to want it to be a lot more. So you're probably going to want like 8 to give it a lot more laugh, a little more bumps. The foam thickness, you're probably going to want to increase a little to give a bit more lava. So I'm going to set this to probably 3 or 4. Say about 3. Lava flows a lot slower than water does. So we'll want to set these values a lot slower. Flow speed, wave spread. You're probably going to want the wave spread a lot less as well. And there you go. That is more of a lava shader, sort of. There you go. Just changing this up just enough so it can add a little bit more to it. So you can see you've got more of the water here and then the lava effect there. But you can see you can create both patterns with this one shader, which is really nice. You can also mess around with this and probably even change it to something like an acidy color. So you've got some sort of acid. So you can see here, this is more like an acid. You probably want to make the foam density a lot less, probably something like 3, with the foam thickness being a lot less as well, probably something like 1 even, or even like maybe a 2, and then make this like a dark green. And there you go. You've got some sort of acid. You can change this up to be however you want it to be, but you get this nice little moving shader here, and you can mess around with all these settings. You can even stop its movement altogether and just have the actual little dots moving slightly in the area, which works really well for still water and stuff as well. You still get a slight movement, but none of the rippling craziness. So that's all it's going to be for this video, guys. I hope you learned something new on water shaders or shader graph and how you can use it to create some cool looking water and lava shaders, even acid if you want to spread. You can even probably turn this to mustard if you wanted to. I'm not going to do that in this one, but I thought it'd be a cool idea just to, say. But yeah, guys, that's it. If you want to see more visual effects, sort of shader graph and other visual effects like adding trails and particles, definitely let me know and I will do that. One thing you can do to make the lava or acid more cool looking is you can add in a particle effect that kind of bubbles up either the green acid off this, so just little particles that bubble out of it, or even lava, so you can have it spinning up and falling down like little lava effect using the particle system, which is really easy to do. But if you want to see something like that, let me know in the comments down below, guys. That's going to be it for this video. I will see you in the next one. Peace out.